Hi everyone. This is a short lecture on the pinup girl. I am doing it on my phone, you're right. I'm going to piece some things together and show you some things on the computer. We're having a little trouble with Adobe Connect right now, so we're going to do kind of old school. The pinup girl is important because she defines a lot of things during World War II and after, and I want you to pay close attention to the ways in which articles like Richard Woodward's article argue that a woman is being produced in this moment in order to market an ideal. So to begin, a typical pinup girl is the Vargas girl. Alberto Vargas, one of the most famous pinup artists, I think. He died in 1982. He originally did these pictures for Esquire, later picked up by Playboy, and Vargas's pinup girls are always playful, innocent, and a little bit childlike. They're never lascivious or knowing, and that's part of their charm. So first I want to talk about the Westbrook article and the very interesting argument he makes about moral obligation. His argument, in short, is that Americans were taught by pinup girls not to fight for America specifically, or any kind of political state. They were taught to fight for private values, private obligations. In other words, soldiers didn't go to war to fight for the country. They went to war to fight for their wives, their girlfriends, their sisters. In other words, Westbrook is talking about the construction of women as the cultural construction of women as objects of obligation. Both objects and duties, but these are privatized. So you're not fighting for the nation, you're not fighting for a political system like democracy, you're fighting for your obligation to protect those near and dear to you. This argument was often made with racial or racist overtones, where you had to protect your white women from being taken away by the enemy. This is a picture from his article, and you can see that it's a caricature of a Japanese officer carrying off a naked white woman. This is what you're fighting against. Significantly, the woman that you're fighting for, or the women that you're fighting for, are not seductive sirens, towering Amazons, glamorous movie actresses. They're women like Betty Grable, who look like the girl next door. Betty Grable became immensely popular as a pinup girl during World War II, partly because she was ordinary looking. I mean, she's obviously very pretty. She's a paragon of white standards of beauty, but she's short, she's cute, she's not skinny or incredibly voluptuous. She's just supposed to be a normal person that you might know, that you might fall in love with, that you might want to fight for. The article points out that in October 1943, Modern Screen reported that a soldier had died clutching Grable's photograph. Richard Schickel had scoffed that she was democratic womanhood's lowest common denominator, but it was precisely for this reason that she came to stand for those worth dying for. Jane Gaines said in her time, Grable was model girlfriend, model wife, and finally model mother. Indeed, her popularity increased after she married band leader Harry James in 1943 and had a child later that year. Rather than being seen, as not desirable, she was seen as more desirable. She was more popular as a pinup mama than as she had been as a pinup girl, which says a lot about American aspirations for domesticity, the yearning to return to a home and to a kind of stable environment represented by the girl next door who becomes your wife. One of the striking images Woodward talks about is this map reading exercise where soldiers are taught to read maps by looking at a grid superimposed on Betty Grable's body. Woodward says that here you can see the dark side of the protector, right? The soldier as protector is also encouraged to see the woman's body as terrain, as something he can hone in on and study, something splayed out and available, something that's turned into a geography of home. This was, kind of map reading thing was said to be an aiding concentration, but it's hard not to view it as a targeting of Grable's anatomy, in which case Grable's image proved eminently adaptable to an expression of a darker side of the pressing obligations connecting men and women during the war. Though male soldiers were the principal collectors of pinups, the pinup girl also addressed herself to American women, suggesting that if men were obligated to fight for their pinup girls, women were obligated to fashion themselves into pinup girls worth fighting for. Pinup girls, that is, argued for a reciprocity of obligation. Men are obliged to protect you, and you're obliged to make yourself worthy of protection. She says, I pledge myself to guard every bit of beauty that he cherishes in me. That's her job. Betty Grable was important in that she also symbolized this mutual obligation. Her rise to box office heights during the war was due as much to the women who came to see her movies as to the soldiers who pinned her up overseas. Girls can see me in a picture, she said, and I feel like I could be one of them. During the war, she was offered to women, especially working class women, as a model of female virtue on the home front. Men are so right about everything, especially Betty Grable, declared Photoplay. Girls who want to be brides should aim to be like Betty. Young working class women avidly followed Grable's career in the fan magazines, where her domestic life, as they portrayed it, was held up as an example to readers. Even though Grable was making a six-figure yearly salary in the fan magazines, she was still the little family budget keeper, living within her $1 million means and outfitting the ranch house with bargains from the Sears catalog. Above all, it's Grable's self-effacing modesty that recommends her to women. Advising her readers on how to please men, she said, remember to follow their lead from dancing to conversation. Talk about them. The most popular girls at the Hollywood canteen, for instance, are the really good listeners, the ones who hang on to a man's words as if he were the oracle of war and the only person in the room. Betty Grable, Photoplay observed, is as modest as the girl who married Dad. Indeed, as Westbrook argues, the reward of being the protector was that you get to come home and reap your rewards. Given the centrality that the idea of mutual obligation played in marketing the propaganda of the pinup girl and the protector who was fighting for her overseas, it's not surprising that the photograph that's come to signify the end of American participation in the war is one portraying the consummation of the bargain, where the protector exacts his reward from the woman he grabs on the street. This is Alfred Eisenstadt's famous picture of the sailor kissing a nurse in Times Square. And Woodward quotes a few soldiers in New Guinea who had remarked, "We are not only fighting for the 4 freedoms, we are fighting also for the priceless privilege of making love to American women." Woodward argues, having helped win the fight, the sailor and the other soldiers returned home to reap the rewards they believed were their due. And I think it's really important to look at this photograph, both in the way Woodward suggests, as one that celebrates the closing of the war with the protector coming home and reaping his reward, but also to look at, what has been sentimentalized here. We've got a woman who is not in exactly what you might exactly call a consensual position, right? She's kind of bent over backwards, and he's obviously in control. And the fact that this photograph is so celebrated is what I think Woodward is arguing, that this photograph, which we could read it as a little bit disturbing, right? We could say, wow, I hope she agreed to that kiss. This is celebrated as the victory photograph. of the war. And I think it's worth thinking about the way that women were marketed as both an obligation and a reward. And it's worth thinking about how in the years after World War II, they were encouraged to continue that project and to go home and to concentrate their lives not on being nurses, but on being wives and mothers and the center of domesticity for the soldiers who had returned